Dr. J. Smith, coming back to you again after a really tumultuous month and an exciting last 2 weeks. What a 2 weeks we've had. It's been not only intensive, but certainly has been instructive and very enlightening, because it's certainly one of the, well, probably the best thing that I have seen come down the pike in the last 40 years, and with such a publicity, with the public now seeing what we've been trying to say for years and years and years, but have not had the platform to do so. And it's all because of two Muslim scholars who have decided to go public with what they know. One was Dr. Shabir Ali back on May 19th, who during his Ramadan lectures came out with a small lecture on just the problem with preservation of the Qur'an. Now remember that the Muslims have to really apply this and have to very much accept it, not to say nothing of the fact, support it, because the Quran itself says so. Chapter 85 verse 22 says that this book is uncreated, and so therefore it has always existed, the eternal word of God. Also in chapter 10 verse 15, in chapter 15 verse 9, and chapter 18 verse 27, it says that this book is guarded, preserved, made so it would not be corrupted or deleted or accreted by Allah himself. So because the Quran makes this claim, Muslims have to support it. There's no way they can go left or right. They have to really work with it. And so that's been the difficulty for them. And that's why when Shabir Ali said this, it was not only was it explosive, he had to quickly qualify what he meant by saying, yes, but though it is, there are many different qira'at, and he's referring to the 7 readers that were added to another 3 came after that in the 1400s. This first 7 were then canonized in the 10th century. The other 3 were canonized in the 15th century, and then another 20 on top of that, because each one of those 10 readers had narrators, or like students that came after. And those 20 add to the 10 makes 30. So 30 different qira'at, 30 different readings. And when Hattun's team there in London looked at just 23 of them, they were able to come up with 93,000 differences, almost 100,000 differences. So it stands to reason that people were asking this question, what about all these qira'at? And Shabir Ali had to say this. However, he said, in all of these 93,000 differences, though he didn't give that number, I don't even think he knows that number, because nobody's done any work on this and had actually tabulated the numbers of them until Hattun's team did. At least I've never come across these kind of numbers, and I had no idea it was this extent. But he had to say that none of these 93,000 differences changed any doctrine or any belief or any practice. He said that over and over again throughout the video. If that wasn't damaging enough, 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks now, on June the 8th, you had Dr. Yasser Qadr over here, who's representing the West, represents academia, being questioned by Muhammad Hijab over here, who represents traditional Islam, Orthodox Islam, about 99% of all Muslims around the world, the vast majority of Muslims. And he's asking him this question because he saw what we did back in 2016, 4 years ago, when we held up 26 of these Qurans there at Speaker's Corner. And so he brings Yasser Qadr into an interview, and they go for an hour and 45 minutes. The last 29 minutes is where the real meat hits the road. Now, you're not going to find that in his video. He's taken that out. He is now excised. He has deleted the last 29 minutes. But you'll still find it in Yasser Qadr's video of that interview. And in that interview, Muhammad Hijab asked him a very pertinent question. What about these qira'at? What about these different readings? Which one is the real Quran? Which is the one that's in heaven? Which is the one that we read about in chapter 85, verse 22? Which is the one that Uthman created or canonized in 652? And he puts his hand down and he says, can you write? I'm going to give you a blank piece of paper. Write, which is that Quran? Is it going to be Hafs? Is it going to be Khalun? Is it going to be Warsh? Is it going to be any of these 30 that are made official? Hattun and her team, well, actually it's Hattun herself, has been able to collect 37 of these already. So you can see the struggle between these two different worlds there a little over 2 weeks ago. But as a consequence, I've been getting all kinds of feedback from people. Not just myself. David Wood has talked about this. Islam Critique has talked about this. Fadi on Sira International has talked about it. Hatun has brought up this material on her DCCI, and I've certainly been bringing it up in the last 2 weeks, especially on Fander Films. So it stands to reason that there are many questions. Many of you don't understand what we're talking about and are confused. And you misunderstand what they're saying or what we're saying. So what I've decided to do is I've decided to put together a series of videos, because this is a question that we've been dealing with for, well, in my case, for almost 40 years. It's nothing new to us. And these questions on the Qur'an especially have been around for, goodness sakes, for 1,000 years. So this is not new. This is not new at all. So what I want to do is go through all these areas, but rather than just do it right here in the studio, I've already done this back in London. Not quite a year ago, in September of 2019. I did 2 lectures at Kensington Temple, big church there in central London, and there were about 600 to 700 people who attended those meetings. The first night I did was on the emergence of Islam. Now that is already up on Fander Films. You can see it. I put it up a few weeks ago. That whole talk, about 2 hours long. The following night I did a critique of the Qur'an, looking at all the historical problems, not the internal. That's a whole nother lecture. That's for another day. Not looking at all the problems inside the Quran. I was looking at how the Quran as it stands in history. Some of these questions that are coming up in the last 2 weeks or in the last month. And I went through 12 areas. I went through 12 different sections. So rather than me repeat myself, I'm just going to put up that video in installments, going through all the 12 areas. And these include, well, the first, well, I'm going to talk about the claims that the Quran and Islam makes about the Quran itself. I'm going to start with that one, and that will be the first video. And also, probably in that same video, I'm also going to talk about what modern Muslim leaders claim about the Quran. And then I'm going to go back and look and see what early Muslim scholars said about it, and see if there's a disconnect. And you're going to find there is going to be a huge disconnect between those. Then I'm going to come back to the studio here, and I'm just going to unpack what that means for today. So each one of these segments that I'm going to bring to you from KT, because it was in September of 2019, we've moved way beyond that in just the last few months. New material has come to hand. We are now coming to new ways of saying it and communicating it. So I'm going to come back here and unpack what has just been said on the screen, what you're going to see, and show you how that fits into the narrative that we're referring to, or that Muslims are trying to deal with today. After that, we're going to go and we're going to look at some historical anachronisms. And then we're going to come to the source criticism, looking and see where these stories in the Quran actually came from. Because you're going to find that these did not come from heaven. They came from other men who wrote much earlier and then were borrowed by Muslims and incorporated into the Quran. But you need to see where that is. And you need to see how that works. So we're going to talk about that. From there, we're going to go and actually look and see how Muslim traditions tell us how this book was actually written. And we're going to look at some problems with what the Al-Bukhari says in volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510. Then we're going to move actually to the earliest manuscripts, the 6 major manuscripts that I talked about and debated with Dr. Shabir Ali way back in 2014, 6 years ago. Following that, we're going to zero in on one of those manuscripts, specifically the Sana'a manuscript, and we're going to look at the palimpsest, because the Sana'a manuscript has 2 layers, not just 1 layer. And we're going to look and see what we now know about the lower layer compared with the upper layer. Then we're going to move to the controversy that came up in 2015 concerning the Birmingham folios, which Adnan Rashid just brought up about a week ago. And we're going to look at the difficulty with carbon datings. And I'm going to add some more material that we've found out since then that will be added to the talk that I did in KT. After looking at the radiocarbon datings, the 4 radiocarbon dating lab reports, we'll then move into it's now, let's call it 30 late diacritical variants. This is the kit up. This is the material we're working with today. This is the material that you all want to hear about. And I'm going to talk and I'm going to show you what I said back in September. And then I'm going to add to that new material that we've now learned since then. And also to help you, just walk you through very easily, because I know most of you have not heard this before, what we're actually saying and what we're actually demanding of the Muslims concerning this Qira'at. After we do the Qira'at, then we're going to go to the Razm. Remember, I've been saying that we need to get back to the Razm variants because these are much more damaging than the Qira'at variants. Though the Muslims have a problem with that, and this, according to Yasser Qadhi, is the biggest problem for Muslim scholars to deal with. It's not the biggest problem. Wait till you see what we're now finding about the Razm variants. I'll probably also do, within that, I'll do a separate video looking at Sidki's critique of Dr. Brubaker's book. I'll do a whole video just on his critique and how to answer it, how to answer every one of his major points against Dr. Dan Brubaker. From there, we're going to go look at the 63 extant, supposedly earliest fragments. These are the 63 earliest fragments, what Muslims call the entire Quran, or at least 96% of the Quran that exists before 719, that's the 8th century. And then we're going to actually find out how this book actually was canonized, where it came from. This book that I have in my hand here. Where in the world did this book come from? And we'll look at that at the very end. Now, because of the fact that this was done in 2019, I will go ahead and give a synopsis and a conclusion for each one of these segments so that we bring it up to date, so that you, knowing that most of you have not heard this before, and for those of you who had, you may not be aware of where the arguments lie, just to bring it down so that we can understand it now here in June and July of 2020. Okay, sit back, get some coffee, and enjoy this, and we'll try to put these up segment by segment by segment so that you can not only learn from this, but also say something about it. There's the comments at the bottom. Muslims, I want to see you come back. I want to see you give me some response. Don't just look at the title and start vitrioling all over the place. That's not what I want to see. I find so many of you Muslims have not even looked at the video. The questions you ask or the statements you make prove that you haven't even seen what we're saying. You need to listen to what we're saying. You need to see the implications of what we're coming up with, and you need to respond. So let's have some good responses. Let's have some good debate. Let's have some good discussion, so that not only you Muslims are aware of what Yasser Qadhi has now found here in the West. We in the West do not have a red line that we stop at. We do not have this view of this reverence for the Quran. We do not have a reverence for any single book. We can ask anything we want. There is no line that we have to stop at. I know you have to. You can't go beyond that red line. But we are going beyond the red line. And as Yasser Qadhi said, if you continue to stay at that red line and refuse to accept what we're now finding, then you will be the emperor with no clothes. And you don't want to be naked in front of all of us. Come on, let's get some responses. Let's get some discussion. Let's have a good debate. Good on you. Okay, this is Jay, over and out. We'll be coming back then with the first segment. See you then.